Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Jaya Nitai Gauranga Jaya Nitai Gauranga Nitai Gauranga Jaya Nitai Gauranga
Jaya Nitai Gauranga Jaya Nitai Gauranga Nitai Gauranga Jaya Nitai Gauranga. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
We'll start with prayers. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naranchaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tatho Jayamudiraed Nashta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Reading from Bhagavad Gita as it is, Chapter 7, Knowledge of the Absolute, Text 20. Kamaihi Taihi Taihi Hrita Gnanaha Kamaistaistar Hita Gnanaha Prapadyante Anya Devataha Prapadyante Anya Devataha Tam Niyamam Asthaya Tam Niyamam Asthaya Prakritya Niyataha Swaya Prakritya Niyata Swaya कामैस्तैस्तैर्हितज्ञानाः प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवताः तं तं नियमम् आस्थाय प्रकृत्या नियताः स्वया कामैस्तैस्तैर्हितज्ञानाः प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवताः तं तं नियमम् आस्थाय प्रकृत्या नियताः स्वया कामैस्तैस्तैर्हितज्ञानाः प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवताः तं तं नियमम् आस्थाय प्रकृत्या नियताः स्वया कामैस्तैस्तैर्हितज्ञानाः प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवताः तं तं नियमम् आस्थाय प्रकृत्या नियता स्वया
कामैस्तैस्तैर्हृतज्ञानः प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवताः तं तं नियमम् आस्थाय प्रकृत्या नियता स्वया
कामैस्तैस्तैर्हितज्ञानाः
प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवताः तं तं नियमम् आस्थाय प्रकृत्या नियता स्वया
कामैस्तैस्तैर्हितज्ञानाः प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवताः तं तं नियममास्थाय प्रकृत्या नियता स्वया
कामैस्तैस्तैर्हितज्ञानाः प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवताः तं तं नियमम् आस्थाय प्रकृत्या नियता स्वया
कामैस्तैस्तैर्हितज्ञानः प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवताः तं तं नियमम् आस्थाय प्रकृत्या नियता स्वया
कामैस्तैस्तैर्हितज्ञाना प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवताः तं तं नियमम् आस्थाय प्रकृत्या नियता स्वया
कामैस्तैर्हितज्ञानाः
प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवताः
तं तं नियमम् आस्थाय प्रकृत्या नियता स्वया
कामैस्तैस्तैर्हृतज्ञानः
प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवता
प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवताः
तं नियममास्ताय
तं नियममास्थाय
प्रकृत्या नियता स्वया
प्रकृत्या नियता स्वया कामैस्तैस्तैर्हृतज्ञानाः
प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवता
प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवताः
तं नियमम् आस्थाय
तं नियमम् आस्थाय
प्रकृत्या नियतः स्वया
प्रकृत्या नियता स्वया
कामैस्तैस्तैर्हृतज्ञानः
कामैस्तैस्तैर्हृतज्ञानाः
प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवता
प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवताः
तं नियमम् आस्थाय
तं नियमम् आस्थाय
प्रकृत्या नियता स्वया
प्रकृत्या नियता स्वया
कामैस्तैस्तैर्हास्ताय
कामैस्तैस्तैर्हृतज्ञानः
प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवताः
प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवताः
तं नियमम् आस्ताय
तं नियमम् आस्थाय
प्रकृत्या
नियता
नियताः स्वया
कामैस्तैर्हृतज्ञानाः
कामैस्तैस्तैर्हृतज्ञानः
प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवताः
प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवताः
तं नियमम् आस्थाय
तं नियमम् आस्थाय
प्रकृत्या नियताः स्वया
प्रकृत्या नियता स्वया
कामैस्तैस्तैर्हृतज्ञानः
कामैस्तैस्तैर्हृतज्ञानः
प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवता
प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवताः
तं नियमामस्तय तं नियमामस्तय
तं नियमम् आस्थाय
प्रकृत्या नियता स्वता
प्रकृत्या नियता स्वया
कमलातस्तैहन्य
कामैस्तैस्तैर्हृतज्ञानः
प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवता
प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवताः
तं नियमम् आस्थाय
तं नियमम् आस्थाय
प्रकृत्य नित्यस्वयः
प्रकृत्या नियते स्वयः ऑनलाइन कामैस्तैस्तैर्हृतज्ञानः प्रपद्यन्ते अन्यदेवताः तं नियमम् आस्थाय प्रकृत्या नियता स्वया word to word meaning कामैहि by desires तैहि by those तैहि by those hrita distorted ज्ञानाः knowledge प्रपद्यन्ते surrender अन्य other देवताः demigods tam that नियमम rules आस्थाय following प्रकृत्या by nature नियताः controlled स्वया by their own Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Translation: Those whose minds are distorted by material desires, surrender unto demigods and follow the particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures. Translation with repetition. Those whose minds are
distorted by material desires,
surrender unto demigods and follow the particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Those who are freed from all material contaminations surrender unto the Supreme Lord and engage in His devotional service. As long as the material contamination is not completely washed off, they are by nature non-devotees. But even those who have material desires and who resort to the Supreme Lord are not so much attracted by external nature because of approaching the right goal. They soon become free from all material lust. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is recommended that whether one is free from all material desires, or is full of material desires, or desires liberation from material contamination, or is a pure devotee and has no desire for material sense gratification, he should in all cases surrender to Vasudeva and worship him. It is said in the Bhagavatam that less intelligent people who have lost their spiritual sense take shelter of demigods for immediate fulfillment of material desires. Generally, such people do not go to the Supreme Personality of Godhead because they are in particular modes of nature, ignorance and passion, and therefore worship various demigods. Following the rules and regulations of worship, they are satisfied. The worshippers of demigods are motivated by small desires and do not know how to reach the supreme goal. But a devotee of the Supreme Lord is not misguided, because in Vedic literature there are recommendations for worshipping different gods for different purposes. Example, a deceased man is recommended to worship the sun. Those who are not devotees of the Lord think that for certain purposes demigods are better than the Supreme Lord. But a pure devotee knows that the Supreme Lord Krishna is the master of all. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said that only the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is master and all others are servants. Therefore, a pure devotee never goes to demigods for satisfaction of his material needs. It depends on the Supreme Lord, and the pure devotee is satisfied with whatever he gives. Thus ends the Transcendental Bhakti Vedanta purport. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Prasharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyata Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, we are discussing from the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the knowledge of the Absolute, and we are in verse number 20. So, prior to this, there's one verse before this, which is one of the most important and famous verses of Bhagavad Gita, which says, Bahunam Janmanam Ante Jnanavan Mam Prapadyate Vasudeva Sarvamiti Sa Mahatma Sudurlabhaha. So, the word prapadyate and prapadyante. So, today we have another word, prapadyante, that is surrender, and prapadyate is also surrender. So, here it is, in the previous verse it is said that after many lives, after many births, that Gnanavan mam prapadyate. So one who is actually in knowledge, in complete knowledge, surrenders mam prapadyate, surrenders unto him. Who is that? The Supreme Personality of Godhead, because Lord Krishna is instructing this to Arjuna. So he is saying that after many lives, births and deaths, one who is in full knowledge surrenders unto me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vasudevah sarvamiti, knowing me to be the cause of all causes and all that is. Sa Mahatma Sudurlabhaha, such a great soul is very rare. So after discussing the various kinds of people who surrender to the Lord, and after discussing the 4 kinds of people who do not surrender to the Lord, Lord Krishna is explaining who is that actually surrenders to him in completeness. So Lord Krishna is saying that one who is in complete knowledge surrenders unto him. Now, not everyone is in complete knowledge, and therefore there are also people who surrender to different demigods in this case. So in this verse that we see, today's verse, so anya devataha, so there are people who surrender to Krishna completely, and there are people who surrender to anya devataha. So the word anya devataha Prabhupada translates as the other demigods. So now the question is, why is that some people surrendering to the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna completely, and why is that there are people who are surrendering to anya devatas? So that is being addressed in this verse, where it is being said that kamais taistar hitagnanaha. So the word hitagnanaha is very important. So Prabhupada is, in the word to word translation, Prabhupada is saying distorted knowledge, or in the purport Prabhupada is saying whose minds are distorted by material desires. So basically it is being said here that one who is in complete knowledge, as we see in the last verse, will surrender unto the Supreme Lord, but one whose knowledge is distorted, whose knowledge is not complete. And we also see Prabhupada use a very interesting phrase in other places for hitagnanaha, is that poor fund of knowledge. Poor fund of knowledge. So fund usually we think means something which is financially some amount of money that we have kept, but the word fund also means that it represents some quantity of something which is intangible. So just like poor fund of knowledge, so a quantity of knowledge which is not complete, which is incomplete. So poor fund of knowledge. So when one does not have complete knowledge, kritagnanaha, and they are also motivated by material desires, then they surrender prapadyante anya devataha. Now they also do, people whose minds are not completely in full knowledge and who are also distorted by material desires, they also worship the demigods or surrender unto demigods in a particular way. In what way? They follow the particular rules and regulations of worship according to their own natures. So as we see that in the Vedic literature, there is a lot of description about various kinds of worship to various demigods, and based upon the modes of material nature in which one is predominantly existing, someone is existing in the mode of passion, someone is in the mode of ignorance, and based upon that there are different kinds of worship to different kinds of demigods is being described. Even in demigods there are different kinds of demigods, and there are different kinds of sacrifices, there are different kinds of worships that are being recommended in the Vedic scriptures. So people, based upon their nature, they choose and prefer one over the other, and they start worshipping the demigods. So what is so significant about this? Why is it important to understand this? It is quite significant to understand because, especially when we hear about Hinduism, as soon as we see open a Wikipedia page or the general conversation on Hinduism, the idea is that there are so many different gods and they are all equal, they are all same. Just like people say, you can take different roads and reach the same destination. So why do you not consider everyone to be equal? Or sometimes people think that okay, worshipping this god, that god, and any other god. In fact, sometimes Hindus are so liberal in one sense. They say you can worship anything and everything. You can worship any god, anything and everything. Sometimes even not only about what are the different kinds of gods I worship, no, I can worship anyone and everything. So people end up in understanding in different ways about what is actually the Vedic literatures are speaking is sometimes very complex, intricate to understand what is the actual essence, what is the actual message. Is Hinduism a polytheistic religion, monotheistic religion? People can interpret it in many, many different ways. But it is very important to understand that one who is in complete knowledge about what the Shastras are speaking, he comes to a different conclusion from a conclusion which the mental speculators take. Mental speculation means that I equate anything and everything based upon my speculation, my thinking. I tend to equate anything to anything. There is no real tangible fact out there. So whatever little I know here, little I know there, so I tend to equate everything to the same thing. And we can also say there are various spiritual organizations which tend to do this. But it is very important we should hear from the message of the Shastras, because in the end, if you look carefully, one has to refer to the authoritative Shastras to understand what is the truth. And here Lord Krishna is clearly saying that those whose minds are distorted by material desires surrender unto demigods. It is not that one who is in full knowledge. Now, it is also important to note that who are these demigods? So this is also an interesting word. So the word demigod, so we usually hear the word God, but it is also interesting to know the word demigod means something who's like approaching to the God, or who's very much of similarity to God, but not actually the God. It is demi, it's not complete. So Prabhupada also in his various expressions in his various places describes demigods in different contexts. So one way to understand who the demigods are, that they are material departmental directors. So Prabhupada in one place says they are material departmental directors. Just like Prabhupada says, there is the president of the country, and then there are different ministers taking care of different aspects of the functioning of the government. So if there is one president, but there can be multiple department heads or the ministers. So similarly, one may say, compared to a layman, definitely these ministers have higher power. But that does not mean that those people who are ministers are equal to the president. The power of the president is not to be equated just because someone is higher in power than the layman, does not necessarily mean that they are equal to the power of the president, who is the supreme. So just like when the Lord creates this material world, the Mahavishnu from his pores, how these different universes come up, and we see that the Lord, for the management of this material world, has appointed different demigods. Indra, Chandra, Varuna. So like this, there are different demigods. And all of these demigods are definitely higher than the human beings. In the sense, they have some higher power. And in that sense, they can also bestow some things when certain sacrifices, certain worship is performed to them. So it is not that there is no idea of this worship is mentioned in the Vedas. No, it is not being said like that. But it is also to be understood in what context the worship is being talked about, for whom it is being talked about, and why it is being talked about. So one example Prabhupada gives is that of just like one may give respects to the constable or a policeman. So giving respect to the policeman or the government means one is giving respect to the government or the president. But at the same time, it does not mean that if I simply give respect to all respect to the policeman and the constable, and not respect the president at all, or I just think the constable is the president himself, then I'm lacking in knowledge. That means I'm having poor fund of knowledge. Whereas, on the other hand, the Vedic literatures help one. So in the usual sense, people do not want to take any authority, do not want to have any authority. They want to live a life of freedom, life of whatever comes to their mind, whatever they think is right. They do not want to verify whether that's truth or which is untrue. They do not care for that. They go by their own desires. They go by their own mental thinking. But on the other hand, the Vedic scriptures, they systematically try to bring an individual to understand the importance of authority. And not everyone is willing to take or understand the supreme authority. And therefore, just like a citizen who is not at all respecting any government authority, who does not know who the president is, he does not know anything about state, he may do activities which is against the authority. But compared to that, it is better to have a person who at least obeys the constable and may not understand the president and does not respect him. So in that sense, by the individual trying to learn how to respect the policeman, the constable, he is learning to appreciate the idea of authority, the idea of working under rules and regulations, of respecting and surrendering to the instructions of the constable. And therefore he will follow the rules and regulations, at least that much. But he may not understand that I need to follow many other things which the president is saying. At least in that sense, compared to a person who is criminal, who is completely against the rules and regulations, who is completely against understanding any authority, someone who is understanding some authority is better. But a person who is understanding some amount of authority, he can be trained further and further to understand the different hierarchies and eventually understand that yes, president is the highest, and I must be conscious of what he is thinking, what he is planning, what he is doing, along with, so when one who is surrendered or following the instructions of the president, that means naturally he is also following the instructions of his entire government, the entire functioning institution of government. So in that sense, there is a distinction between the president and the constable and a person who is understanding only the authority of the constable or the authority of the president. So in that sense, it is very important that understanding these distinctions are very helpful. Secondly, it is also helpful because as we know, in the Vedic literatures, there are the entire Vedic literatures, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that the entire Vedic literatures can be divided into 3 sections or can be classified under 3 divisions. So one is the Sambandha Jnana, that is the knowledge of one's relationship with the Supreme. So to understand who the Supreme Lord is, and then to understand what is one's relationship with the Supreme Lord. And the second is Abhideya. Abhideya means there is, once one understands that one has got a certain relationship with the Supreme Lord, one has to act in a specific way. Just like when I understand that I am part of this institution, then I start to follow the rules and regulations of that institution. If I'm working for a certain company, I start to follow the timings of the company, the necessities of that company become my priorities in life. And once I leave that institution, I no more have to abide by the rules and regulations of that institution. So once we understand the relationship with the Supreme Lord, then immediately there are certain, our actions has to follow from those principles of relationship. And the third aspect is prayojana. So when we are acting in a certain way, in a certain relationship, it has a goal. So the Vedic knowledge also talks about what is the goal of that endeavor or that activity of following a certain kind of activity with the Supreme Lord in a certain relationship. What is the end goal of all that? So it is said that, as we see in the later chapter of Bhagavad Gita, we see that the demigods, as we saw, they are material directors, or they are also beings with higher powers. they can bestow certain things to the people. What they can bestow? They can bestow some material gain. Because they bestow material gain, people worship them. As we see in the purport, Prabhupada is mentioning about a deceased man is recommended to worship the sun. So in this way, you can see there are different people take to different worships. Yes, for rain, they worship one demigod. For some other necessities, they worship another demigod. So in this way, people worship different demigods. But if one looks carefully, the goal of all this worship is material gain. The example of different demons that we see in the Bhagavatam and other places, Ravana, for example, is worshipping Shiva so that he can get material power. Similarly, someone is worshipping Brahma so that they can get a life which is never ending. But it is important to note that the goal of this worship, it is important for us to understand the sambandha of the position of the demigods. What is their position? Who are they? And in what relationship we should act with them? And what is the goal that one achieves when one worships demigods? So, as we see that in other places, it is mentioned, just like in the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, it is mentioned that by worshipping demigods, one goes to the planets where demigods are present after the death. So, just like Prabhupada gives us example, just like if you see from far off place, you will see that the earth is looking like a small ball. You will not see that there are people inside this. You will not see that there is a president, there is different departments. You will not see any of those things. You will just see a speck, a small ball that is present. But if you carefully see, there are people here, and there is a hierarchy also. Similarly, each of the planets, especially in the higher planetary system, there are different demigods who are in charge of the planets. Now, by worshipping them, the goal that one would achieve is either one gets some material immediate benefits, or at the end of the life one may reach that planet. But by worshipping Krishna, Krishna says one comes back to him, to the spiritual abode. So even the demigods, they are part of the material realm. They are not part of the spiritual realm. They are definitely higher compared to a common man, but they are not completely freed from all material contaminations. They are definitely devotees of the Lord, but they are not the same as the Supreme Lord. And therefore, when one is worshipping these different demigods, according to Vedic scriptures, they are trying to gain something in return. Good health, good marriage, good wife, good promotion. So these are the desires with which they go to the demigods, because demigods, by pleasing them, they can give this material benefits. But on the other hand, what one receives when one worships the Supreme Lord is that one is freed from all material contaminations. The return is not of material gain, but it is of spiritual gain. But as we will see here, that even if one wants a material gain, still the goal of worship should be the Supreme Lord. So let us look at some points which Srila Prabhupada is mentioning in the purport. Those who are freed from all material contaminations surrender unto the Supreme Lord and engage in his devotional service. So it is not very easy to surrender unto the Supreme Lord and engage in his devotional service. Devotional service is very special. Devotional service is not a business transaction. Unlike the normal worship that people do, they go to church, they go to temple, so that they get something in return. Their faith is increased only when they find the return. If my business becomes more prosperous, or if I get something which I'm seeking materially, if that is fulfilled, then I become more devoted. If not, I come out of it. So that's a business transaction which most people do when they go to worship the Lord in the temples. But pure devotional service means to only do service for the pleasure of the Lord, only to satisfy Him, not for any other reason. To act in such a pure manner means one must be freed from material contamination. What is material contamination? Prabhupada explains elsewhere that material contamination means, Prabhupada explains in two ways. One, he says that one material contamination is that to think that one can get freedom from struggle for existence without God consciousness. Everyone is undergoing struggle for existence. There is no one. The existence is made in such a way that any living entity in this material world has to undergo struggle. And if one really wants to come out of this struggle, one may think that, oh, maybe I'll do some advancement in technology, maybe I'll do some advancement in missile technology, in some other technology, that will solve the struggle for existence. That's not true. Actually, that is the trap of illusion. To endeavor in the wrong direction and assume that one can be freed from the struggle of existence. That is all the Maya and illusion is all about. And one is perpetually working hard in the wrong direction, and especially in a direction without God consciousness. That is material contamination. The another kind of material contamination, in another place Prabhupada explains that material contamination means to enjoy the material world. To think that there is happiness in this material world, and by material endeavors one can find true happiness. So one who is having this material contamination, that this place, this material world is the place for me to be happy, and the objects of this material world are going to give me true happiness, that is a material contamination. Material contamination also means that one is trying to satisfy indriya priti, one is trying to satisfy one's own senses, or one is trying to satisfy lust, greed, anger, enviousness, jealous. So one is trying to satisfy these things and not the Supreme Lord. When one is having all these tendencies, then one cannot surrender to the Supreme Lord, because he does not see the value of surrendering to the Supreme Lord and engaging in his devotional service, because he thinks, oh, what a great loss I'm going to have. I'm not going to enjoy this material world. So why do I worship the Supreme Lord? I'm not going to get so much money, I'm not going to get this. So what is the point in worshipping? Because I'm supposed to be here and enjoy this world. Or someone thinks that, oh, by my hard work alone, I will overcome all the struggle for existence. So why do I need to surrender to the Supreme Lord? Why do I need to engage in his service? I will engage in my own service. So as long as one is filled with material contamination, one cannot engage or surrender to the Supreme Lord and engage in his devotional service. That's why the role of the spiritual master is very important. It is so difficult to be freed from material contaminations, because the living entity, as soon as one comes into the contact with the material world, the material contaminations are naturally part of it. And that's why Prabhupada writes in the next sentence, as long as the material contamination is not completely washed off, they are by nature non-devotees. Because by nature, as soon as the living entity comes in contact with the material nature, the living entity who is Brahma Bhuta, who is pure spirit, is now affected by the modes of material nature and forgets one's true nature and becomes a non-devotee. So as soon as one becomes a non-devotee, now one needs a process of purification. One needs a process of purification to remove this material contamination. When the process, by the right process, when one undergoes, this material contamination vanishes. And then one can understand the science of God. Without that, one cannot understand the science of God. One may think, oh, why are not people able to understand God? Show me God. But the person who is asking does not know whether he is qualified, whether is he free from material contamination. Is he really pure in his consciousness? If he is not, how can he understand? And therefore, the Acharya's role is so important. The Acharyas give the right process. The process which is appropriate for time, place and circumstance, and which is based on the Shastras. Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. So they give instructions based completely on Shastra. And by following that process, one can see that the heart is freed from material contamination. Nashta prayeshu abhadreshu. Abhadra, which is inauspicious, And that can go by Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, by constantly, regularly serving the book Bhagavatam and the person Bhagavatam. By simply doing that, this material contamination vanquishes. So, in that state, one can completely surrender to the Supreme Lord and engage in his pure devotional service. But one may say, okay, in this state right now, I'm not completely free from all the material contamination, so what should I do? Still I should worship the Supreme Lord, or should I still go to worship the demigods and then come to the Supreme Lord? So Prabhupada here is explaining, but even those who have material desires and who resort to the Supreme Lord are not so much attracted by external nature because of approaching the right goal. They soon become free from all material lust. So even if one is having certain material desires, it is being said, still one should understand the position of the Supreme Lord and still worship Him, because they are worshipping the right object of worship. Soon those abhadras, those material contaminations which are present, because the Supreme Lord is one who is free from all material contaminations, and therefore by associating with Him we get freed from this material contaminations. Prabhupada says that the Supreme Lord, His name, His form, His activities are all free from material contaminations. And therefore, when one chants Hare Krishna Mahamantra, when one reads Krishna Katha, when one goes and visits the darshan of the deities in the temple, when one honors prasadam, by all this association, we are getting freed from material desires. And therefore, we can see any devotee who is actually rightly following this process, there is a reduction in the material contamination. And in due course of time, even though in the beginning there may be different kinds of material desires, material contaminations, but eventually by the association of the Lord, one, by the process that is given by the pure devotee Srila Prabhupada, one can see that even the goal is right in the initial, the motives may be different, but in due course of time, the motives also become the right motive. And here it is being said, further Prabhupada quotes from Srimad Bhagavatam, it is recommended that whether one is free from all material desires or is full of material desires, or desires liberation from material contamination, or is a pure devotee and has no desire for material sense gratification, he should in all cases surrender to Vasudeva and worship him. Because by surrendering and worshipping Vasudeva is the only process by which one can be completely freed from material contamination. Is the only process by which one can actually transfer oneself to the spiritual world. Is the only process by which one can get freedom from the struggle of existence. There is no other process by which anyone guarantees that one is freed from all struggles of existence. And neither one finds the highest and complete happiness that one is seeking. Everyone is seeking for Anandamaya Abhyasat. Everyone by nature is full of bliss, but not finding that true bliss, one is searching in different places. But by surrendering to Vasudeva, who is the reservoir of all pleasures, one can find the true happiness, the true pleasure one is seeking for. So here in Bhagavatam it is being said, doesn't matter wherever you start off with. You may start off with full material desires, no material desire, you want liberation, you are a pure devotee, it doesn't matter. Begin to follow the instructions of Vasudeva, surrender to Vasudeva and worship him. Simply by doing this, everything will fall in place. So Prabhupada goes on to further state, it is said in the Bhagavatam that less intelligent people who have lost their spiritual sense take shelter of demigods for immediate fulfillment of material desires. So people think that immediately if I gain something, that's all in all that I care for. People even do not realize that there is a life after this life. And what is going to happen in my next life, people are not even aware of that. So people are thinking, immediately if I gain something, that's all I need to care for. Just like a thief. A thief is not thinking, oh, if I steal this, this is not recommended. This is not the right thing to do. But he is thinking, oh, there is an immediate gain here. Let me just steal whatever I'm finding. But he does not know that tomorrow he can be punished for what he is doing. His life can be more miserable. He will be confined. He will be bound to four walls. So he is not seeing that. Poor fund of knowledge. So similarly, people who are not having complete knowledge, they think, oh, I'll get some immediate benefit. So let me just take some material gain from the demigods. Generally, such people do not go to the Supreme Personality of Godhead because they're in particular modes of nature, and therefore worship various demigods. Following the rules and regulations of worship, they are satisfied. So unless one does not come to the mode of goodness, in fact, the mode of pure goodness, one cannot worship Krishna. As I was just explaining some time back, that the worship of Radha Krishna is much more intricate. There are more rules and regulations. Because unless one is not worshipping the pure, the Lord who is supremely pure, if one is not in the mode of goodness, one cannot worship the Lord. And in fact, one has to be in the pure mode of goodness to actually worship the Lord, Sri Krishna, who is all pure. So because people are not in that elevated modes of nature, people by their natural proclivities tend to worship different demigods. Because and the spiritual master is one who gives a process by which one overcomes the lower modes of material nature. The process that Srila Prabhupada has recommended very quickly helps one to overcome the lower modes of material nature if done the right way. And that's why we see the hippies. They were intoxicated, they were women hunters, they were lost in their lives, appearingly purely in the mode of ignorance. But by the process that is given by Srila Prabhupada, they were immediately transformed. They were taking different kinds of austerities for the service of the Lord, because they have elevated their consciousness, or they were freed from the lower modes of material nature. And by that, they could understand the signs of God. They could understand the signs of Krishna. They could worship Krishna. So that is only possible by following the principles given by an acharya, and that's why Srila Prabhupada is very, very special, because Srila Prabhupada wants to give us the highest benefit. And therefore, one can see in Srila Prabhupada's teachings, he is very clear about the position of Krishna, the position of other demigods. He is not mincing words because it is based on Shastra. There are many people who speak apparently, logically looking very nice, rationally looking very nice, but they are not basing their words on Shastras. The worshippers of demigods are motivated by small desires and do not know how to reach the supreme goal. But a devotee of the Supreme Lord is not misguided, because the devotee of the Supreme Lord wants everyone go to the supreme goal, and therefore they do not mince words, they do not misguide people. Just because in Vedic literature there are recommendations for worshipping different gods for different purposes, those who are not devotees of the Lord think that for certain purposes demigods are better than the Supreme Lord. So there are different reasons why people approach different demigods, but Srila Prabhupada is explaining here that a devotee of the Lord, he recognizes that for everything I'm just dependent upon the Supreme Lord. For this small reason, for that small reason, I don't have to go anywhere else. Just like the child who is under the shelter of good parents. The child knows that, okay, if I'm just surrendered to the parents, I'm taken care. I don't have to go here and there and beg something. Not necessary, because parents are going to give you everything. Similarly, the Supreme Lord, who is Shadaishwarya Purna, who is complete in all opulences, the 6 opulences, he can give us everything. In fact, he wants to give us the most beneficial thing. Unfortunately, because our hita jnana, poor fund of knowledge, we desire something else. We ask for something smaller. But it's by the mercy of pure devotee, the pure devotee helps us to understand what is that we should even ask from the Lord. How should we even worship the Lord? So that all instructions come from the pure devotee who guides us in the right way. But a pure devotee knows that the Supreme Lord Krishna is the master of all. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said that only the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna is master and all others are servants. Therefore, a pure devotee never goes to demigods for satisfaction of his material needs. He depends on the Supreme Lord. The pure devotee is satisfied with whatever he gives. A pure devotee is very, very special, for he is completely dependent on the Supreme Lord. In whatever circumstances, the so special quality about this pure devotee is that is always engaged in the service of the Lord, always trying to please the Supreme Lord. Whether one is poverty stricken, even if one is poverty stricken, one thinks it is a mercy of the Lord. Even if there is nothing, there are no people, there is nothing happening, still because the pure devotee of the Lord is completely clear, full in jnana, bahunam jamanamante, jnanavan mam prapadante, jnanavan, completely in knowledge of the position of the Supreme Lord and the importance of devotional service. So that pure devotee is never, that's why Prabhupada is so special. A pure devotee of the Lord is very, very rare to find, because only a pure devotee can give pure devotion, unadulterated devotion, and who is completely surrendered unto the Supreme Lord. Because it is from that association that we can get faith. Otherwise, when we are filled with material contamination, how can we understand the Lord who is free from material contamination? We can never imagine that there is something like that there is a God who is pure. No, I cannot understand. Just like someone who's living the slum all the way in his life in small country somewhere, he may not recognize that people in maybe the Washington DC, like President Biden, may have a house which is filled with so many things, with so many rooms. One may not be able to conceive. Similarly, we may not be able to conceive who the Supreme Lord is. So only by the association with a pure devotee of the Lord we can understand the position of the Supreme Lord Krishna, who is the master of all. And Prabhupada has established this fact based upon the authority of the Shastras. And one can also see Phalena Parichayat. People who are practicing the process as given by Srila Prabhupada, they get transformed very quickly. Even people from other religions, from any perspective, when they see, yes, these people are sober. These people are serious about what they are doing. So that transformation happens when one follows a pure devotee and accepts the Supreme Lord and worships the Supreme Lord. And to develop that faith, we need to take shelter of the pure devotee. And it is through that we can understand the position of the Lord Sri Krishna, the position of other devotees, the other demigods, and so on and so forth. So with that, I'll stop and see if there are any questions or comments.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, very enlightening verse. I just have one doubt. If I have something I'm wishing, like, somebody health to get better, or I'm wanting like a better job or school or something, is it wrong to ask Krishna, a Supreme Personality of Godhead, for such a thing? Is it like asking the president, oh, I'm having problem with my plumbing, can you please come fix? Is it inappropriate to be asking material desires of the Supreme Personality? Thank you, Prabhuji.
Yes, thank you for this question. Yes, Prabhupada explains in another place, just like you explained the example of plumbing. Prabhupada says, if one goes to the king and asks for ashes, can you please provide me? The king says, ask whatever you want, and he says, give me some ashes. It's not worthwhile, not meaningful. So usually when we ask, why do we ask something? We ask because we think that is the highest gain. So we have a certain assumption, certain conception that I know what is the highest good, not only for me, for everyone else. And therefore we think that it is by this that actual good takes place. But actually the real good is known to the Supreme Lord. And He may have a plan which is much, much better than what we can, with our tiny brains, can think of. So the best thing is to let the Lord decide whatever is appropriate for us, whatever is due for us. The Lord is actually, as we were seeing today morning, there was a verse which Prabhu was mentioning, that in Brahma Samhita it is said that Lord is impartial. and therefore he gives what is due for everyone based upon their activities. But one thing we should all desire is to become good devotees, servants of a pure devotee. That should be the desire, because that is going to take one to the real goal of life. And that helps, that desire is not material desire. All other desires, we do not know what they bring along with it. They bring another kind of trouble along with it. But this spiritual desire is what one frees one from all other, as I was talking about, the struggle for existence. The real desire should be to free from struggle, apavarga vartamani, to be free from all the struggles of existence. Why not we ask for that? And how do we ask for that? By becoming servant. Because if you become the servant of the president, it is said that almost the servants of the presidents also enjoy the similar kind of life what he is enjoying in the same house. So by associating with the Lord, all the smaller things can be easily fulfilled. So why worry about them and trouble that I want smaller things when the Lord is willing to give so much more? So it's the best to ask the Lord to give whatever is appropriate. But at the same time, it is, as it is said here, it is better that we at least approach the Supreme Lord to ask something rather than do something else. This is better, but the best thing is to let Lord decide, not have specific individual prayers, but let Lord decide what is best for us.
Thank you, Prabhu. I'm having one more doubt. When we are having some health issues, we'll think of that how to reduce that health issue, but at that time we'll think of the God. Okay, but how it will reduce until unless if we ask to the God, first it will reduce, then we can go for praying the God, or it's in reverse way. First we need to go on chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Rama. Then it will reduce our health problems. How it will be? I'm little confused over here.
Okay, I hope I understood your question. If not, you can repeat again. But so basically, when we think of God, Prabhupada says, just like sometimes in India, Prabhupada gives example of people go to a Swamiji and say, "Can you cure my disease?" Or sometimes a Swamiji will come and say, "Give me 1 ounce of gold, I'll make it 5 ounces of gold. You give me 100 ounces of gold, I'll make it 500 ounces of gold." So someone may come and give some gold to him, and he will vanish with that gold. So when we have the idea of God or some spiritual teacher, we think that, "Please take away my disease." Or
I feel like it depends on the previous karma, because of something we did it bad in previous life, so that is affecting us. So first we need to reduce, means we need to do seek some help from the God, or
So actually in the few verses before, there are 4 kinds of people who surrender to the God. So one kind of people who surrender is because of artha, their distress. So different kinds of distresses make people surrender to God. That is one kind of surrender. But the problem is, as soon as the distress is gone, one forgets God also. Yes, so that is one kind of devotion. But the better kind of devotion is to actually understand who the God is and why I should serve Him. When one comes in complete knowledge, that's why Gnanavan Mam Prapadyate. So unless one is not equipped with the knowledge, one cannot break down the karma. So that's why one should take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master. So bona fide spiritual master is one who can train. Wherever you are, the bona fide spiritual master will give you a formula. You don't ask to cure this disease. Cure the most fundamental disease because of which this disease has come. And by following the prescription of the pure devotee, all diseases will vanquish. You have to take prescription. The patient does not know what is the solution. A patient by his own mental concoction may think something is right. But what is the best way? Go to a bona fide doctor. Similarly, we should take the instructions of a bona fide spiritual master as what we should do and follow him. Then all solution is gone. Otherwise, you may think that you are having an ulcer, but maybe there is problem in abdomen or somewhere else. So the point is, take shelter of a bona fide spiritual master, then everything else will fall in the right place and all diseases will vanquish.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Okay, if there are no questions or comments, we'll stop here. Granthiraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande. Thank you all for joining. Hare Krishna.